Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang mag-ibig, telas ng sinananan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatak tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang islang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magtitindig. Luman ang araw ng walhaging pagsinta, mo'y langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya ng pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Hello everyone, I am Melanie Sumanga and I am here to give you an overview about our topics for today. For the Platform 1, this is entitled Budgeting and Cost Estimation in Project Management. Under this topic, there are some pointers to be discussed by my fellow groupmates. The first two pointers are budgeting and project budget, to be discussed by Ms. CEANNEN TALAPIERO. Next, the types of budgets in project management and costing and planning are to be discussed by Mr. ARDAIL SAMBAT. And the next three pointers, which are step to create a project budget, importance of budgeting in project management, and the conclusion of budgeting will be discussed by Ms. Regiwel Haring. And for the meaning and wide definition of cost estimation in project management and the elements of it will be further discussed by Mr. LORENZ PAULE. And for the last part of this presentation, I will be discussing the importance of cost estimation and the methods for cost estimation and project launch or execution. So I guess let's start. You may now turn on your microphone and your camera, Ms. CEANNEN TALAPIERO.
Thank you, Melanie. In this part, I'm going to discuss budgeting in project management. It's not uncommon for people to use the budget project to evaluate its performance. Project delivery success can be measured by looking at the factors such as the budget, the scope, and the schedule. However, a comprehensive analysis must consider if the project's results have complemented the organization's long-term goals. It's not only about finishing the project on time and on budget. Budgets are critical for a variety of reasons. Well, budgeting is the process of developing plans to spend and use money in an organization. Budgeting helps allocate funds for project consumption. As a result, overutilization is avoided, and a balance between efficiency and effectiveness is achieved. The project manager is in charge of making the project to run smoothly. This guarantees that the project efficiency, standards, timeliness, and quality are all met. The primary role of a project manager is to ensure that the project is completed on time, on budget, and to the highest quality standards possible. Every project is built on these three pillars: money, time, and quality. However, even if quality and time are equally important in the project's life cycle, nothing can move forward without the required funding or the budget, which necessitates a carefully planned and accurately projected budget. There are some consequences of improper budgeting. Everything about the project revolves around the budget. The duration and type of the resources, operations, and activities used within the scope of a project are determined by the quantity of available or required cash. An oversight, poor choices, or miscalculation in project finances could lead to the entire project failure. When it comes to underestimating the project costs, there are also plenty of situations that could go wrong, many of which would have terrible results. Most important are the results in terms of exceeding customer expectations. If you can't meet the project's agreement of outputs and quality requirements, it could have a severe impact on your credibility and future development as a professional. This could harm the reputation of your company and the morale of your entire workforce. Negative consequences can occur early in the project's life, but they usually do so unexpectedly and rapidly, which has a significant impact on the project's progress. When these issues are discovered, it's sometimes too late to react quickly and effectively to keep the project on track by making the necessary adjustments and changes to do the budget from the beginning. Why should you use a budget? Well, there are some reasons that you should use a budget. It is for to stay within a limit, to control, to forecast, to delegate, and to prioritize your wants and organize your needs. So what is a project budget? Well, to put it in another way, a project budget is the entire amount of money set aside for a given purpose during a specific period of time. Budget management's purpose is to keep the projects under control while still meeting the agreed upon project goals. Successful project means meeting the 4 success criteria. It is the project scope must be delivered on time, within budget, and it must also fulfill the quality expectations of the provider and recipients after the delivery has taken place. To be genuinely successful, project managers must focus on achieving all of these goals. Project budgeting occurs only in the project planning process, usually along with the project schedule. The procedures involved in budgeting are heavily reliant on work duration estimates and resource allocation. Budgeting allows for cost comparison and measurement. Budget is generally a predetermined parameter in project implementation. Cost increases when a schedule slips. When project expenses start to rise, the project manager should review the scope, budget, and schedule. So what is the goal of project budget? Well, the goal of budget management is to keep the project costs within the limit of the agreed budget while still achieving the project objectives. In order to be considered a success, a project must achieve the 4 criteria, which is the scope, the budget, the timeliness, and the quality. Project managers who want to be truly effective must concentrate on satisfying each and every one of these criteria. And that's all for this topic. And for the next discussion, may we call on Mr. Dale Sambat. You can now open your camera and your microphone.
Thank you, Ms. Talapiero. Now, I am going to discuss about types of budgets in project management. But first, let me define first what is budget planning. Every project boils down to money. If you had a bigger budget, you could probably get more people to do your project more quickly and deliver more. That's why no project plan is complete until you come up with a budget. But no matter whether your project is big or small, and no matter how many resources and activities are in it, the process for figuring out the bottom line is always the same. It is important to come up with detailed estimates for all the project costs. Once this is compiled, you add up the cost estimates into a budget plan. It is now possible to track the project according to that budget while the work is ongoing. Project budget helps the implementation of money, costs, and resources for the project. Approval of the budget helps forecast operations which might not be adequate. Any changes made in correspondence to the planned budget is so during the project. Often, when you come into a project, there is already an expectation of how much it will cost or how much time it will take. When you make an estimate early in the project without knowing much about it, that estimate is so-called a rough order of magnitude estimate or a ballpark estimate. This estimate will become more refined as time goes on and you learn more about the project. Here are some tools and techniques for estimating costs. First, determination of resource cost rates. People will be working on the project all work at a specific rate. Any materials you use to build the project, example wood or wiring, will be charged at a rate too. Determining resource cost means figuring out what the rate for labor and materials will be. Next is vendor bid analysis. Sometimes you will need to work with an external contractor to get your project done. You might even have more than contractor bid on the job. This tool is about evaluating those bids and choosing the one you will accept. Next is reserve analysis. You need to set aside some money for cost overruns if you know that your project has a risk of something expensive happening. It is better to have some cash available to deal with it. Reserve analysis means putting some cash away in case of overruns. Next is cost of quality. You will need to figure the cost of your quality-related activities into the overall budget. Since it's cheaper to find bugs earlier in the project than later, there are always quality costs associated with everything your project produces. Cost of quality is just a way of tracking the cost of those activities. It is the amount of money it takes to do the project right. A well-devised project budget helps put in place the earned value analysis during the work process cycle of a project, thereby placing the project under control. The project budget is divided into sub-goals and make the decision-making process much easier. Project budgets can be of two main kinds. First, resource budget. Matters concerning cost allocation for internal resources. And second is financial budget. Matters concerning cash flow, payments, and external resources. Costing and planning. What is costing and planning? In every project management process, the budgeting process involves requiring a cost estimate. This is an approximate prediction of how much money is needed to complete a project, as it helps with assessment of project feasibility. It is thereby to be noted that accurate cost estimation helps with better management of the project budget. Estimation of cost is usually done for the following. First is the materials. Second is equipment. Third is services. Fourth is software. Fifth is the facilities. And the last one is the personnel. Costs are bifurcated into direct and indirect costs. Direct costs are those that you can allocate directly to the core business activity, such as an administrative salaries, materials, supplies, equipment, and travel costs. Indirect costs are those which are allied and supportive, such can include office space rent or general and administrative costs. Planning a budget involves knowing industry-accepted techniques to estimate costs. Listed below are the most common ones. First is analogous estimation. Existing or similar projects which have been completed are researched to determine costs for new projects. This technique is comparative. Second is resource cost estimating, creating a tabulation of all the resources needed for the project and thereby creating a budget. Third is bottom-up estimating, calculating estimates based on individual tasks and project activities. This provides a detailed outlook of estimation in terms of the project part by part. Fourth is expert judgment. Industry experts, seniors, and subject advisors are hired to provide insight into past projects and market foray information. Multiple expert and diligent opinions help in better planning of a strong budget. Budgeting in project management. It is the process of creating plans to spend and use in an organization makes up budgeting. Execution of budgeting in project management is essential. The project manager holds responsibility for the streamlined working of the project. This ensures that project efficiency, standards, time, and quality are not overlooked. As discussed earlier, there are two types of budgets in project management: resource budget and financial budget. Here are the steps to create a project budget. First is create a task list of requisite cost elements. Use historical data, estimate component requirements, understand how competitors manage budgetary control, take advice of experts, confirm accuracy of report, streamline the budget based on above steps, test the budget on pilot projects, get approval from respective authorities. We have to take note of its importance. Helps restrict unnecessary expenditures. Money is appropriately allocated to prioritize objectives. Good communication and a shared vision. Inputs are received from all the levels of the hierarchy. And that's it for the types of budget in project management and costing and planning. For the next topic, I would like to introduce Ms. Ray Jewel Harim.
Thank you, Ms. ARDAIL. The creation of a project budget is part of the planning phase of the process of project management groups. Am I clear and audible? Okay, so let me share to you some steps on how to create your own project budget. For the first step, identify project scope. Before you can know the cost involved in your project, you must first be clear on the project scope, timelines, and deliverables. For example, if a big project must be completed in a short time frame, you're likely to need staffing help. Consequently, a well-defined project plan is a prerequisite for budget in project management. An ideal approach is to build out a work breakdown structure for the project. The work breakdown structure allows you to capture all work involved in delivering a project at a detailed level. From there, it becomes much easier to assess the resource requirements for budgeting. The second step is define resources. After you understand what a project entails, you can begin assembling the pieces of the budget. This means determining the resources required to complete a project. To give an example, in launching software products for various companies is that many project budgets encompasses the same 4 ingredients with a fifth for miscellaneous items based on the nature of the project. For easy consideration, here are some factors. First is this staffing. Staffing is the foremost and most expensive cost. Does your project require additional team members? If so, how many and for how long? If the new staff will be paid on an hourly basis, the length of time should be in hours. Second is the equipment. Equipment can take the form of machinery like an excavator for a construction project, or it can be the addition of tools like project management software. What equipment is required for your project? Capture this in your list of budget items. Third, the sales and marketing. The nature of your project could involve sales and marketing costs. For example, when launching a new product, an advertising budget becomes a necessity. Some projects may not involve sales or marketing costs, but if they do, be sure to factor in expenses like sales commissions. Fourth is training. When a project is undertaken, usually some degree of organizational change management is introduced. Changes require training. The more extensive the change, the greater the training investment. For the fifth and the last factor is miscellaneous items. Another set of project cost consideration is dependent on your particular project needs. If you must travel for the project, then travel expenses must be part of the budget. If outside companies are engaged, their fees must be accounted for. List all the people and items that you'll need to successfully complete the project within deadlines. Align the resources required for the project with what you already have available today. If there's a gap, this represents the scope of items requiring additional expenditures. From there, you can determine the budget itself. Step 3. Assign amounts. Now that you know a project's resource needs, it's time to assign amounts. Go down the list of resources and begin evaluating costs for each. Determining amounts can be hard. That's where research comes into play. Investigate historical budgets for similar projects in the past. Perform research online or talk to team members who have insight into the various items and related costs for the project. For some resources, it's necessary to model out costs. This is particularly true for staffing, where employee salaries vary from person to person and time is a factor. Consequently, it's effective to create a model in project management software or a spreadsheet to estimate staffing costs across the time frame of the project, using an average salary or industry norms for the position. Fourth step is build your budget. Once you've gone down the list of resources required for the project and assign amounts, you will have your estimates. Remember to include a contingency fund as part of your budget. Next, compile these estimates in your project management software or whatever tool your company uses for this purpose. If you're using a spreadsheet or other freeform tool, it's helpful to group related items together. For example, all the training-related line items, like printing costs for training materials, should be together under a training bucket. As part of building your budget, note any assumptions that went into figures. This is important because once a project begins, some of the assumptions may hold true and others will not, resulting in actual project spend diverging from the budget. By capturing the assumptions, you'll understand why the budget didn't reflect reality. In addition, include a timeline if the budget spans a significant period of time, usually more than a month. This allows any recurring costs to be clearly identified in the budget. It also helps you identify the timing when certain costs will arise. Finally, review the budget with other project teammates to get feedback. Another set of eyes on the budget can identify missing items and confirm the accuracy of amounts. This also helps you avoid budget mistakes right before seeking approvals. And for the final steps, obtain approvals and implement. When you present your project budget to stakeholders or other business leaders who must approve it, be prepared to justify the items and amounts. This is when you'll want to highlight key assumptions and other rationale, such as the staffing model. Once the budget is approved, it's among the project manager's responsibility to oversee it. It's a good idea to use project management software to track costs. As the project management triangle dictates, if teammates start to fall behind on deliverables or unexpected delay arise, costs will be affected. You need to have visibility in your current costs so you can compensate or request an increased budget with a valid rationale and game plan for how to get costs under control. Now that we know the steps in creating the project budget, is this important? TBH, yes. Budgeting helps measurement of performance against expenditure. In a business, it ensures that resources are fully available for the workflow to support business growth and smooth functioning. Budgeting makes sure that availability of capital is set straight as well as providing estimates for expenditure and revenue. The business can focus on making the project reach successful completion with good returns on investment. To sum all this up, let me lay down to you the following points. First, budgeting helps restrict unnecessary expenditure to balance revenue against cash flow. Second, with budgeting, it is ensured that money is appropriately allocated to prioritize objectives of the project at hand. Third, a properly drafted budget plan ensures that all levels of management are aware of how the project should be conducted. This ensures good communication and a shared vision. Fourth is sharing of budget forecasts with all the members of the project. It can ensure that inputs are received from all the levels of the hierarchy. Therefore, having a budget allows you to limit the number of options available to a company or its project manager from unnecessary planning, which can ensure that a project is completed on time before the available funds run out. The budget allows the project manager to know how expandable limits are. Once a budget is in place, the project manager can determine the money spent on each component of the project. A budget allows those in charge of purchasing to determine the percentage of funds that they can divide into elements of the project. This provides the opportunity to determine whether or not the project can be completed with the available budget. Budgeting in priority helps prioritize the different parts of the project. It allows the prioritization of those parts of the project that need to be completed initially, with putting other parts on hold. And for the meaning and wide definition of cost estimation in project management and its elements, here is Mr. LORENZ PAULE.
Thank you, Ms. Reggie Walaring. What is cost estimation in project management? A project can only come together with all the necessary materials and labor, and those materials and labors cost money. Putting together a budget that keeps costs to a minimum while maximizing the project's quality and scope can be challenging. This is why proper cost estimation is important. Cost estimation in project management is the process of forecasting the financial and other resources needed to complete a project within a defined scope. Cost estimation accounts for each element required for the project, from materials to labor, and calculates a total amount that determines a project's budget. An initial cost estimate can determine whether an organization greenlights a project, and if the project moves forward, the estimate can be a factor in defining the project scope. If the cost estimation comes in too high, an organization may decide to pare down the project to fit what they can afford. It is also required to begin securing funding for the project. Once a project is in motion, the cost estimate is used to manage off all its affiliated costs in order to keep the project on budget. Next is the elements of cost estimation in project management. There are two key types of cost addressed by the cost estimation process. This is the direct cost. Cost associated with a single area, such as department or the project itself. Examples of direct costs include fixed labor, materials, and equipment. Next is in the indirect cost. Costs incurred by the organization at large, such as utilities and quality control. Within these two categories, here are some typical elements that the cost estimation will take into account. First is labor, the cost of the team members working on the project, both in terms of wages and time. Materials and equipment, the cost of resources required for the project, from physical tools to software to legal permits. Next is facilities, the cost of using any working spaces not owned by the organization. Next is vendors, the cost of hiring third-party vendors or contractors. Also risk, the cost of any contingency plans implemented to reduce risk. The last part of this presentation, Ms. Melanie Sumanga will be discussing the importance of cost estimation and the methods for cost estimation and project launch or execution.
The question is, why is cost estimation in project management so important? There are three conventional wisdoms says project managers must adhere to be successful. And these are time, scope, and budget. Project managers who can stay on budget will quickly find themselves struggling in a field defined by the art of managing resources constraints. After all, no one wants to work with someone who's constantly going over budget. One infallible way to make sure your projects actually stay on budget. Get really good at estimating how much things cost. Cost estimation helps you achieve what you say you're going to achieve within the financial constraint you're given by executive and stakeholders. as one of the defining features of successful progress, accurate project cost estimation must take a front seat when it comes to setting up a project's parameter. If you want to understand more about the effect of cost estimation has on meeting clients' expectations and guiding a project toward success, keep the following things in mind. 3 tips for better project cost estimation. Number 1, always think of the budget. When starting a new project, the best way to keep the importance of cost estimation in mind is to never lose sight of the project's original budget. While the numbers may change due to constraints, changes in the project structure, or the simple reality of changing climate demands, keep the initial figure in your head and try to stick with it. Next one is chart out each cost. And the third one is keep updating. Keep a detailed account of all the spending you do, whether it's budgeted for or not. This works especially well for projects with a longer time frame, which often involve a greater amount of financial uncertainty. When it comes to project cost estimation, try to use one of the following 4 trusted methods and stick to it. Knowing and being able to trust your methodologies is vital when accurately projecting and measuring costs. 4 methods for cost estimation. For a project that comes with very few details, try analogous estimating. If you're working on a project that's similar to one you've done in the past, you can use that data in parametric estimation. The third one is 3-point estimation. This one is helpful deduction technique if you've got some crucial data but not all the information you need. Lastly, bottom-up estimation. This is considered as the gold standard for projects that require a meticulous listing of costs, progress, and time tracking.
There are 4 project cost estimation techniques. How exactly project managers completing a cost estimate depends upon a number of factors. Some organizations, for example, require all projects to be budgeted for according to very specific policies. Others may differ to the expertise of the project manager. Similarly, many organizations might work off of rough estimates in the earliest stages of project planning compared to later stages where more exact estimates are required. We will explore 4 of the most common cost estimation techniques that you can leverage. The first one is analogous estimating. Through analogous estimating, a project manager calculates the expected cost of a project based upon the known cost associated with a similar project that was completed in the past. This method of estimation relies upon a combination of historical data and expert judgment of the project manager. Because no 2 projects are exactly the same, analogous estimating does have its limitation. As such, it is often leveraged in the earliest stage of project planning, when a rough estimate can suffice. Analogous estimating can also be used when there is relatively little information about the current project available. The second one is parametric estimating. In parametric estimating, historical data and statistical modeling are used to assign a dollar value to certain project cost. This approach determines the underlying unit cost for a particular component of a project and then scales that unit cost as appropriate. It is much more accurate than analogous estimating but requires more initial data to accurately assess cost. Parametric estimating is often used in construction. For example, an experienced construction manager might understand that a typical new home will cost a certain number of dollars per square foot. If this average cost, the margin of error, and the square footage of a new project are known, then parametric estimating will allow them to identify a budget that should accurately fall within this range. Other examples might include estimating the cost per unit to print and bind a book or to build an electronic device. For the third one, bottom-up estimating. In bottom-up estimating, a larger project is broken down into a number of smaller components. The project manager then estimates costs specifically for each of these smaller work packages. For example, if a project includes work that will be split between multiple departments with an organization, cost might be split out by department. Once all costs have been estimated, they are tallied into a single larger cost estimate for the project as a whole. Because bottom-up estimating allows a project manager to take more granular look at individual tasks within a project. This technique allows for a very accurate estimation process. And the last technique is three-point estimating. In three-point estimating, a project manager identifies three separate estimates for the costs associated with your project. The first point represents an optimistic estimate where work is done and funds spent most efficiently. The second point represents the pessimistic estimate where work is done and funds spent in the least efficient manner. And the third point represents the most likely scenario, which typically falls somewhere in the middle. Three-point estimating relies on a number of weighted formulas and originates from the program analysis and review technique, or PERT.
For the last platform, project execution or project launch. What is project execution? The execution phase involving carrying out the details of your project charter in order to deliver your products or services to your clients or internal stakeholders. First comes project planning. Then comes project execution. No matter how well you plan, your project won't be successful unless you can effectively implement your ideas. Project execution typically involves three primary components. First is following processes. Second, managing people. And lastly, distributing information. Following processes. During the planning phase of your project management, you should have outlined systems and procedures to help finish your project within your organization's requirements. For example, you might have created processes to interact with third-party vendors who supply essential raw materials. Sticking to your processes can help ensure your project proceeds efficiently. Rather than making a series of time-consuming one-off decisions, you can look to your plan for guidance and move ahead with confidence. However, if circumstances or market forces change, don't be afraid to evaluate and adjust course. Stubbornly sticking to a plan when a change is warranted can jeopardize your entire project. Secondly, managing people. Making sure your personnel are following the project plan is very important. But keeping people on task is not only your job. It's important that you also motivate, encourage, and cheer them on. Posting on celebrate each incremental victory is one way to show the team how much you value them. And it will inspire them to keep up the hard work. Try to foster a healthy level of internal disagreement. If one of your workers spots a fatal flaw in your project, make them want to feel comfortable coming forward to explain their concerns. And lastly, distributing information to stakeholders and clients. Always involve your clients and stakeholders throughout the execution phase of your project. When you keep stakeholders in the loop, you can prevent costly misunderstanding and delays. The project execution is often the most expensive phase of the project life cycle. Instead of disappearing for weeks or months while you create the final product, encourage open communication and transparency along the way. One way to increase visibility during the execution phase of project management is to schedule regular check-ins to discuss progress. Even better, consider using an enterprise management platform to boost transparency and trust. This way, no one has to wait for a check-in to know where things stand. Tips for successful project execution. In addition to above suggestions that I have said regarding processes, personal management, and communication, these additional tips will ensure your project execution phase is a success. First, assign clear responsibilities and accountabilities to your team members. Secondly, explain the rationale and motivation behind your decisions to get buy-in from your team. And lastly, when you experience a setback, own your mistakes and implement course corrections as needed. Make project execution a priority. While executing your plan might sound like the easy part, considering all the work that went into the planning phase. The truth is that successfully finishing a complex project takes conscious, consistent effort. A work management platform can centralize all communication, collaboration, and project details into one intuitive space. So you can always see at a glance how much progress you've made, what the next best steps are, and how far have left to go.
Thank you for listening. Bye!